Hi, Steve Gillmor. This is the Gillmor Gang, a rare early edition. Scoble is, I think, awake.
Barely.
And Kevin Marks, are you there?
I'm here, yes. Back from my tour of universities in England and New England. And DC. Is DC New England? I can never tell.
What were you doing? Are you going to school again?
My younger son is looking to see what universities to apply, so we had a road trip. Well, train trip and planes and things. No roads involved.
Excellent. Also joining us from the British Isles is Keith Teare.
Hey, good morning.
Good to see you.
Surprised I'm here at this time.
Okay, well, we'll see what happens. The sound is a little rocky, but we'll try and make do. And joining us from New York is John Borthwick. Welcome, John.
Hey, Steve.
Okay, actually, we have a show. And Robert's got his thing on his eye again. You know,
now I'm awake.
What? Your glass told you that you're awake?
No, I didn't feel awake until I had my glass on.
It does have, it looks like you have pink eye, but you're also alert. So, yeah,
There
very
you go.
nice.
Yeah.
Okay, let's start with John Borthwick. John, what do you think is going on in this technology world that we love so much? Anything?
What is going on? It's it's a hot, steamy summer in New York. We have a lot of things going on here at BetaWorks, but in the technology world in general, I think that we're waiting to see what new hardware comes out, right? Waiting for iOS 7. There's some new Android stuff that's beginning to ship, which is interesting. We'll see how relevant it is. There's a lot of peripheral device stuff that's going on. You're starting to see people out there tracking how many watches or smartwatches we're going to see in 2014, 2015, and it's fairly evident that smartphone penetration is reaching saturation in the US. So I think we're going to see a lot of attention switch to the devices, the peripheral devices, and so that's starting to happen. Those are some things that I see going on.
Okay, so of those, in terms of BetaWorks, what do you see as most interesting to your agenda?
From our vantage point, we're very focused on the software side of the stack, and what we could do there. We have started to talk with and work with some people who are building out some of these just component hardware pieces that, but the ones we're interested in, the ones where the software is sort of dominates in the experience, and it's clear that it's going to be differentiated and it's going to be built out as a software company. And then just more tactically, we've had a lot of stuff going on the last couple of weeks with Dig. The Dig reader is out there, and so the Google guys finally pulled the plug on the Google Reader API, not the API, the actual sort of takeout and your ability to get your OPML file and all that stuff earlier this week. So that chapter's closed, and we're sort of focused on building out new features, functionality in Dig. We've had a bunch of stuff going on this week with Giphy and some new launches there. I don't want to go through a laundry list of stuff. There's a lot of stuff product-wise that's going on at BetaWorks.
Robert Scoble, what's going on in your view of the universe?
Well, I've seen stuff that I can't talk about, and
always thrilling.
It's always thrilling. It's like torture for me, man.
Yeah. And
NDAs are torture.
And it's totally useless for the listening audience.
I will say that last week my advice to Microsoft was wrong. When I said
Fire Steve Ballmer?
Well, no, that is actually getting more right. And after August 1st, we can have a discussion about why that's more right. But the advice to just fix the app ecosystem was wrong. That is no longer enough to compete in the mobile world. You actually have to do something mind-blowing and different. And that's going to be extraordinarily hard for Microsoft and BlackBerry.
Hey, Robert, did you see Bill Gurley's post yesterday on his new blog, Above the Crowd blog, called Transitioning to a Mobile-Centric World?
No, I didn't.
You got to read it. It's just because it's from Bill Gurley, there's nothing that new in it, to be honest, for us, because it's stuff we've been talking about maybe for as long as 2 years. But I've never seen anyone in his position come to the conclusions. He basically is saying HTML5 is a head fake, that the browser is dead, that the web-centric cloud is dead. He makes one point I really disagree with, which is on mobile, single features that are very shallow is the only way to go. Like Vine, I guess, or Snapchat. That seems to be his mantra. And that, there's a huge problem of monetization on mobile that has not been solved yet. Plus search is going away and no one's figured out how to replace it. I mean, it's like it's 10 things on a list, all of which I think we've all discussed, but has not become mainstream thinking yet. And
I think the more freaky the product is, the better it's going to do. And it's going to be very hard for companies to do freaky stuff. For instance, like Apple, can they turn on sensors and leave them on all the time and do something with that? That's going to be very difficult for Apple to do. Because it's going to freak out their user base, and their user base, they're on top of the mountain right now, so they're going to be very conservative. They're going to be late to the market with cool, innovative features. I don't think that hurts Apple that much because an Apple user's not going to switch to what I've seen, but it's going to kill Microsoft and BlackBerry. Those companies are really in deeper trouble than I thought even last week.
So I had an interesting meeting at Cisco this week, meeting with Bob Friday, who's the CTO of their mobility group, and talking about MAC addresses of Wi-Fi routers being capable of being discovered with a service layer that can say, this Wi-Fi router can supply to your mobile device the following set of services, which starts to disaggregate the cloud. They're talking about pushing basically storage and caching and content to the edge and interacting directly with wireless devices in situ without having to use the long-haul network for a lot of stuff, which is kind of interesting.
So that's like the return of the ZeroConf stuff, is it? So you can have a router that does interesting things nearby?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay.
Like it might have a movie store on it, or it might have the ability to sell a ticket to a movie theater or whatever.
I'm not sure that makes a big difference whether that's local or remote. It's just a question of making that stuff work properly.
Yeah.
We have lost chunks of that recently. We have this weird thing where we decide things are nearby by checking with geostationary satellites rather than seeing what network we're on. I suspect that's going to resolve itself at some point soon, but it's not new tech. We've had it for 10 years. It's just a question of making things pay attention to it again. And
how's that going to have any impact on whether Apple is going to roll out Apple TV or not?
Apple TV seems to be rocking to me. I mean, the deals they've been doing with Sky and HBO and ESPN, although they are tethered deals which require you to have a cable subscription, but this week it's come out that they're also talking directly to networks to go direct on Apple TV without the need for cable subscription. Basically, the broadcast networks like NBC, ABC, CBS, Fox, and so on.
John Borthwick, if you were handicapping this, would you think that this is even remotely going to happen?
Steve, ask the question. Tell me the question again.
That Apple is going to have success in gaming the HBO TimeWarner lock on.
Yeah, I do. I think that they will. There was a piece I saw this week on just the penetration of the Apple TV product, which is admittedly a limited product at this point, but AirPlay is 70-80% of people who are buying the Apple TV product are buying it because of AirPlay. And so AirPlay is sort of the strategic link that brings people into it. And I think Apple is going to be hugely important in that discussion.
I want to continue this, but Keith, can you put earphones on? Because we're getting some echo from you.
Yeah, I'm hearing an echo on my side.
Yeah, I can do that.
Yeah, if I turn Keith off like this, it goes away. Like that.
Good.
Okay, so I've solved that problem. So, Robert Scoble, do you think that do you have any sense that this that Apple is moving rapidly toward Apple TV?
I don't get a sense that they're moving toward it. I get a sense that it's just happening anyways. But yeah, it seems like Tim is putting a little bit more gas into it lately.
I mean, I think, Steve, what's happening in the background is I think you've got these negotiations that are going on, which are sort of these arduous negotiations around rights and IP. I mean, I think the whole Hulu deal happening, not happening, was remarkably boring to watch. But it's remarkable in that what's happening in the background is that you could see all the players coming to the table, whether it's the existing incumbents, cable guys, whether it's the satellite guys, Dish, and Direct coming into it, or whether it's new players, or even the wireless players like AT&T supporting the churning group and their bid. And so you could see that everybody's seeing the sort of the future come together, and yet it's the rights holders are they're in an important they're in the catbird seat right now.
Well,
but that makes Netflix really interesting, because I'm going to guess that the rights to House of Cards or Orange is the New Black are global and owned by Netflix, and they don't have the same limitations in becoming a content provider to a future distribution ecosystem like Apple TV.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, the complexities of the geographical stuff here. I was talking with somebody earlier this week who's at one of the major multi-channel video providers today, and they've been pushing a whole bunch of IP deals, IPTV deals, but they can only get the rights to distribute stuff in India, and they can't get it in Europe, they can't get it in the US, and so it's all this sort of fragmentation of. So if you're the end to end, if you're in Netflix position, or you should see people like HBO in a strong position, but I think they've yet to assert that. But then I think also users are just like, forget all the IP, all the constraints here, is that users are finding radically new ways to experience, create, and find, let's just call it, I don't want to even call it video-based content, because I'm including GIFs and Vines in there. I mean, I think that the whole sort of the universe of motion-based media is in complete flux right now, and it's there's a lot of stuff happening from the ground up, and there's a lot of happening on the IP side, on the video side, and then there's a lot happening with the incumbent players.
So I must admit, I've always thought that ultimately what will happen is that people like Lionsgate, HBO, the people who pay to produce great content end up being the kings in an open distribution world, that allows them to monetize directly with the viewer, rather than having to go through the intermediaries of cable and satellite networks. And I just wondered how long that was going to take, and it feels to me as if we're at a moment where Netflix is forcing that agenda very rapidly, and others are likely to follow. Netflix, of course, has a dual role. It's also a distribution channel, but you wonder how long that's going to be necessary, because in other words, Netflix as a content producer might ultimately be more interesting than Netflix as a distribution channel.
It's a challenge with both these, because historically these things were vertically integrated. The networks were the content producers, and then we had the explosion of production companies, and then the more movie-like model of you set up a corporation for each individual show and do that. And I think we have seen this bounce back and forth several different ways over the last few years, and I think it's going to continue doing that as they find new ways to make sense of this. But I agree with John that they need to fix their geographical fragmentation problem, which was based on historically shipping prints of movies around, and they're sort of stuck with that because that's the rights agreements they've written over the years. But as it's in their interest to do that, I think that will start happening. And as you said, and I think the Netflix one is a harbinger for that, where they're saying, okay, we'll produce this ourselves and we'll make sure the rights are clean on it.
Right. I think that it's a combination of the artifacts of having to ship celluloid around, matched with the windows, right?
But the windows were because of the shipping of celluloid. But they would make a set of prints and then ship them overseas later.
Yeah, but there was also a mechanism to be able to sort of, look at the entire market and be able to try and segment and extract maximum economics out of the market. And since you've had a sort of unpackaging of the marketplace, you've had an unpackaging of the bundling of these providers, and then you've got a collapsing of the windows, it just were a really interesting time. But I think that, the video guys have, they certainly, they haven't made the mistake that the music guys made. If you want to, I think that it's yet to be seen if they get it right, because you have extraordinarily good TV going on right now. Just the quality of the production of TV is in my lifetime has never been higher, of shows, and yet the accessibility of them is just still all fucked up, right? I mean, with Homeland, I've gone, for the first season I got it on iTunes, and for the second season I couldn't watch it on iTunes, wasn't available on iTunes, wasn't available on Amazon, wasn't available on Netflix. So I signed up to, I believe, Showtime, and I added that to my cable bundle for 1 month in order to watch the season.
I downloaded
season one. I paid. Sorry, just let me finish the numbers, because season one, I think I paid on iTunes for the whole season like $20. I forgot how many there were in there, but like $20, something like that, $19.95 for the whole season. Season two, which is supposed to be a more premium window that they would keep you off iTunes. I signed up to Showtime for 1 month for $9.95. And which I think that I even got TimeWarner to comp me on, and then I canceled. Right, so it's all ass backwards right now. Now, granted, you got to do a little bit of work to go and like navigate around it, but it's still a pain.
But like Game of Thrones was the most torrented series ever, and yet it's also topping the DVD charts. I think and I think that signal is going to get through as well, and they'll realize, oh, wait a minute. Maybe we should close down some of these windows and give people access to this.
Yeah.
Well, the HBO ToGo on Apple TV is fantastic.
Yeah.
And
let's have a look at that.
And Sky Television, I haven't looked at, but that's an interesting play.
Yeah, there was a new one. While we're out on this stuff, Steve, there was a new one I saw that came out this week, which is called Go Watch It, which is there's a lot of echo again. If you go to gowatchit.com, it's like a single place where you can go find out if a particular piece of content is on Amazon, or if it's on Netflix, or if it's on iTunes.
But how does that relate to actually consuming video in this new paradigm?
It basically is a one-stop shop, Steve, to find out where the hell it is.
Right.
Right? Because you hear about something and you say, okay, I want to watch Game of Thrones. What are my options? Where can I watch at?
But that was the thing that Google was trying to do, and that was why they got blanked by the channels, because they don't want you to have that transparency.
Yeah, I know. So we'll see how this thing does.
Which is why I want to go back to whether Apple's really got a chance to be able to pull this off. It seems like the closest that they've ever been.
Yeah.
You know, the ability to. I mean, I've not thought that there was any real rationale for them having a TV set. At this point, I think it's actually a very smart play for them. I mean, I know I'd buy one.
I would too, but the problem is they don't have the distribution to do TVs. Their stores cannot physically hold 1,060-inch or 70-inch TVs.
Yeah, but
and that's what they would take to support the market.
Do you think that they really need, if they got a cable-ready box, right? If the Apple TV, it becomes cable-ready or cable card enabled, and it is simple, and they do a deal with one of the cable guys. Why do they need the hardware?
But
why do they need
that's always been possible, and why has it not ever happened?
That's a deal. That needs to, the cable guys need to agree to that, and Apple need to agree to that.
I think the law of exponents is finally catching up. That's why I'm sort of like skeptical about Tim Cook really doing anything. It's just a doubling effect that's in play. I bought them for all my friends. That took time, and the same thing is happening in a lot of homes around the country. I was at the Apple store last night buying a new wireless thing, and you can see that people are interested in TV. It's just happening. It's just happening because of the doubling effect, and now it's getting to the point where they have enough units out there to really get the attention of executives.
Well, the other thing is that being cable enabled is now technically unnecessary. You don't even need a cable card. That's what TV Everywhere kind of is. It's the subscription is your cable card, and the validation that you are a subscriber plays the role of your cable card. So this week, when they talked about Apple and TimeWarner being close to a deal for the entirety of TimeWarner's cable business being available on an Apple TV, it doesn't involve any hardware change. Even the old Apple TVs would be able to carry it. You just have to validate that you're a subscriber, and they do this authentication code. I just did it because I moved house, you on your Apple TV, you subscribe to HBO. It says go to the web and prove that you're a subscriber. You type in the validation code, you're done, and now your Apple TV has HBO. So no hardware needed. It's pure software. The other thing is it's all about the UI. Going to the Watch It stuff that John mentioned. The thing about Apple is their UI is all about the program, not the network. So when they do deal with all these networks, they're going to be able to integrate where to find a show. And because you've got a deal with the network, the show will just play. So I think that they have an advantage in just aggregating content across lots of networks and doing a better UI. I just had to switch from Dish to Comcast because my new house has trees and they couldn't get a satellite signal.
John looks distraught by what you're saying. I'm not sure what.
Yeah, no, I am. I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about the boxes on the icons on the Apple TV, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking about, right now they're channels.
Right, and you have to know which channel things are on, which is like which movie studio made the movie. It's a bit weird.
And do they evolve into channels or do they evolve into apps? Right. That's why. And what's the difference between a channel and an app? And the first apps were sort of just packaged web pages, and that's why I was pulling my hair out, Steve.
And the answer is that they all.
The answer is yes.
Yeah, and it's big yes because it feeds into push notification, which is the unification of all this stuff.
Mm. But search on Apple TV is still fairly painful. I mean, it's not quite as bad if you're using
Holy hell! Yeah, it's
an
awful.
iOS device. If you're trying to use the little remote, it is hideous, and that's so that is going to be a problem as they expand.
This is why I think the TV actually makes sense.
If they roll up, TVs is as bad. I hate that too.
If they roll up, a combination of what is that called? Your company IFTFT or whatever it's called.
If this and that.
Yeah. If they roll up that functionality, which is that every time that I use that little remote, which first of all I got to find it because it gets lost every 10 seconds.
Three of those in my sofa,
and then I have to laboriously put in my ever increasing number of password characters, and then I give up. So if you can automate that by recording a macro, which basically says I want to go from where I am now to where I was 10 minutes ago, then you're starting to develop a software fabric which controls access to all the TV channels that you're interested in. And all this other stuff about navigation and alerting all disappears. So,
but I'm not interested in TV channels. I'm interested in shows.
Yeah.
And I don't care what channel something's on.
Right,
Any degree at all.
I'm not talking about channels. I'm talking about
right.
Once you have a way of abstracting out the notion of a channel, then you're done. If it becomes an app that you're using, which delivers a notification to your devices.
If the data is there, Steve, and it's what's happening is the channels are, HBO is now on Apple TV, right? But it's there with a limited amount of content, and you have to go into HBO to navigate to find a particular show.
It's less limited than what's available on HBO.
So you're saying you want something more like what Netflix does?
On Comcast, for example, it's harder. The windows have moved to the number of shows that are available. If you've got Hulu Plus, which we do now, it goes back for the whole season. Yeah. It's not whether you have access to it, it's whether you don't have access to it.
Right.
You pay for the privilege of knowing that you've got it somewhere so that you can avoid actually going there because the show sucks.
Actually, all they need is a unified search layer over the top of that can launch the appropriate app stroke channel.
Which is exactly what Google built. Yeah, that was the thing that Google built and then got shot down by them because they don't want that transparency. They don't want you to be able to see that you can get the same show from three different sources at different prices.
Right. Yeah.
Google built that 3 years ago and put it up there, and the cable codes work systematically to shut them down from doing that.
Go ahead, Robert.
And that's what my new Comcast box doesn't do. My Comcast box lets me talk into my phone and say switch to CNN or switch to Breaking Bad or record Breaking Bad or play Breaking Bad, and it all works. So if Apple's next TV doesn't come up to that minimum bar of being able to use voice like that, I'll be disappointed because
but hang on a second.
Already.
If you've got Comcast on and you're looking at it on your Apple TV, then it already works on Apple TV.
Right, and it already works on voice because you've got a gadget that does voice.
That's right. So
that's independent, right?
So
if you've got an Android or an iPhone, it does decent voice.
So I think that what the Times article about Apple gets, and I think they're right about it, is that Apple is moving toward a complementary strategy rather than a replace strategy, which is what Google has done. And as a result, they're going to actually get there a lot faster because people are going to be willing to pay more for the convenience of having it all in one place.
I think people will pay more just to watch what they want to watch and not have to, mind their way through the stuff they don't care about.
Yeah, I know, but I think that's all the scenarios regarding global search, as you're suggesting. All those things pale next to, oh, I'm sitting here, I don't know what I want to do next. Oh, somebody just alerted me, a friend,
right.
Whatever. Oh, yeah, I'll do that. Click. Yeah. That is the model.
Yeah.
And that's the social, integration with social business, blah, blah, blah. All that stuff is coming together
That's where
from
I'm.
a
That's where I'm going
technology
with this
perspective
freaky
right
stuff.
now.
That's where I'm going with this freaky stuff. To really differentiate and change the market, you have to do, contextual stuff. That's why I'm writing a book on this stuff. But you have to go way ahead and do freaky stuff. You have to look inside somebody's Facebook and Gmail and look at Twitter, at their inbound Twitter for mentions of TV shows, and then build a new kind of TV guide that's based on what your friends are watching. Because that's what's informing me. I want to watch Homeland because I missed this week's show because I was on vacation without a TV. And
It's not
is
even
Homeland
on,
back?
is it? It's not back.
not Homeland. What just played this week for the
Newsroom.
Newsroom? Thank you. Sorry. See, you guys all knew what I was talking about, even though I didn't signal at all.
I know,
what
but
was
we're
talking
very sick people. So.
about. No, we're internet connected people, which might be the same thing. But so we all know what we're talking about in terms of TV, because that was the hot TV thing this week was Newsroom coming back, and why didn't the internet bring that to me? And why can't I just talk to my TV and say, "Bring me Newsroom"? Right now, I can sort of do that on my Comcast box, but I can only look at TV they want me to see. They won't show me the stuff on YouTube or on Hulu or somewhere else.
What have you got, Robert? Have you got the X1 or the X2?
I'm getting the X2 shortly. I have the X1 right now, and the X2 is the cloud-based one, so that's going to be even better than the X1. But that'll be,
and that's kind of interesting in and of itself. The Aero, the IAC experiment with the law, seems like it's going to win, and the fact that Comcast
See, I think that's
is
ludicrous.
doing,
It's not going to win.
I mean,
They're
win
going to be
legally,
sued into oblivion.
legally win. I don't mean win in the consumer market. I mean establish the principle that it's okay for a subscriber to a service to have a third party store it in the cloud on their behalf, thus getting rid of the need for the in-home DVR.
John Borthwick, you think that's going to win?
I think that I like what Ario's doing, and I agree with Keith that it seems to legally that seems to be breaking a logjam in all of this, and I think that's a good thing. And so I think Aereo is actually an important piece of the puzzle, and it's a great product. It works really well here in Manhattan.
In Manhattan. So basically, it's over the air, right?
No. Steve, when I met the founder, and it's genius because I thought that you had to get like a little antenna, right, and you had to like shove it into your computer.
Right.
They have at their headquarters in Brooklyn, they have tens of thousands of antennas, and
everybody gets an antenna virtually,
and so you lease one, and then they push it over IP.
Yeah.
That's insane.
No, but it
crazy.
works.
I know it works, but it's a
beautifully.
ridiculous arbitrage, isn't it? Come on.
It is a ridiculous arbitrage, but it breaks a logjam, and I'll tell you is that I had a mind-blowing experience with it during when Sandy sort of blew out our power for 5 days in Lower Manhattan. The only way I could find out what was going on in terms of video was to get on Aereo and on my iPad, and so LTE plus Aereo, thanks to Verizon, worked great. AT&T was dead, and obviously my cable box was dead, and my internet connection was dead, my wireline connection. So it's a pretty neat service.
Yeah.
And you don't think it's going to get sued into oblivion?
They've tried, and as
they have unlimited resources, they will continue to change the kinds of deals that they make in order to make sure that this is not legal.
Well, if you think about it, there's no reason why they should want to do that, because Aereo retains the ads. It's the same signal you would have if you had it at home. And all you're doing is getting the convenience of a cloud-based DVR. So there's no revenue loss or any real change of service from the subscriber point of view.
Well, who's suing them?
But it's the original cable TV model where you take the free-to-air thing and create it as a service. And the challenge is that they now expect to get paid for that by the cable TV companies, and the free-to-air for them is like a decaying thing that they expect to go away. So that's why it's a challenge for them, because it's cutting out the revenues they get directly from the channel subscriptions.
It's kind of like RSS, isn't it?
Not really.
See how I did that?
No, but it's an interesting contrast to what happens in Europe. In Europe, everyone has these boxes called free play, I think they're called. And what happens is all of the cable channels now go over the air digitally as well. So there's like 100 over the air channels. You can get CNN, you can get CNBC over the air, Sky News, Sky Sports, and it's called free play. And every home can just buy a free play box. I think even the boxes are cheap, like $20. And you get any channel you want. If you add a cloud DVR to that, suddenly that's kind of interesting. And we've got digital signals, we just don't use them.
I just think that it's a holding pattern on the way to Apple solving the problem of figuring out how to be able to pay off Time Warner enough to be able to start
the challenge for Apple in that is that because they did succeed in doing that with iTunes for Music, is they're going to be much more wary of
but it wasn't iTunes for Music that I'm talking about. It was pinning down AT&T and breaking the
Oh no, I know, I get that analogy.
The thing that
but the analogy
TV.
that the TV companies are seeing is suddenly Apple became the central point for music, that they had to fight back very much.
I understand.
Right, but Kevin, at some point, this doubling effect swamps all of their fears because they realize that's where their market is. Because they know already the high-value customer in the world has switched to the online method of getting TV, and they know that that's where the market is. And if they don't get on board at some point, they're going to be House of Carded.
Is that
AirPlay?
But the point is
AirPlay
they're not going to just license
the,
Apple. They will license Amazon and Netflix and Google as well.
But
they've got some.
Those are rounding errors compared to what Apple's opportunity is here. The thing
I think Apple is way ahead on the doubling effect. If you double a penny every day for a month, you go from 1 penny to 2 penny to 4 penny to 8 penny to whatever. At the end of the month, you end up with $11 million, right? And unfortunately for everybody else, Apple is about 20 days ahead, or 20 flips of that penny ahead.
Right, and Robert, the really interesting thing is we're in the second half of the chessboard now, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like the numbers get really big, really fast, really fast.
Well, no, because you hit a saturation curve is what actually happens.
We're not close to that. How many?
You get an S curve. You don't get an exponential curve.
How many Apple TVs have sold? A few tens of millions.
30 million-ish, I think.
30 million. So we're a long way from saturation on TV.
Sure.
A long way. We're 3 to 8. We're 5 to 8 years away from saturation.
No, but I think if you want another analogy,
what's that?
Let me give you another analogy. There was a point where every speaker system had to have an iPod dock, right? And if you go to the store and buy a speaker system now, they're using Bluetooth instead because Apple broke the single iPod dock model, both by shipping the iPad which didn't fit into it, and then by changing it to something else. So now what you buy instead is a Bluetooth one that the Apple ones have and the Android ones have too, and then you've got something that works for both. So that you've lost the locking potential that was there, and which means that the things that bought into that ecosystem are now remained down to nothing because nobody wants something that has the old connector on it anymore. And that's the danger of assuming that one ecosystem will be the dominant one. You've got to make sure you've got something that doesn't trap you in a technology.
I agree with you, Kevin. Once Apple blows open the doors, everybody else is going to get access too.
Yeah.
But it's not going to matter because I have an Apple TV box on my TV, and I'm not likely to go and buy an Amazon one or a Google one. Now I am because I've switched my ecosystem behavior over to Google. But even in my family, most of my family's on Apple stuff. Particularly the iPads. The entertainment part of my world is all still on iOS. So I'm not going to be very likely to rip out an Apple TV anytime soon.
No, it's in fact there's more and more that's available. And as I was trying to say before, AirPlay mirroring is the connection point through which all of this Apple TV stuff is going to flow, including a TV box.
But Steve, I
use this constantly. Just let me make the point, Keith.
Yeah.
There was David Sanborn is on tour with what's that guy's name? Bob James, and Steve Gadd on drums, and James Jennis on bass. Incredible group of people, and they were playing in Rotterdam like last week or maybe a couple days ago. I don't know. And a couple of links popped up on Twitter, or maybe it was Google Alerts, for some footage, and I couldn't hear the bass on the iPhone. And so I tossed it up to AirPlay and watched it on the big screen. I could hear the bass, and all of a sudden it was, not the greatest production in the world, but it's music. This is the channel that sort of brings together the television and the music business in a way that has just started to become available. And I have to make a conscious choice now to go to HDMI, whatever it is, to go back to broadcast, to go back to Comcast. Because more and more of the time that I'm spending on this device, on Netflix, on YouTube, on etc. I mean, my daughter, my 12-year-old, she gets all her news from YouTube. Some guy, what's that guy's name? Sorry, go ahead. And Keith, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just wanted to hear it. But John, what were you going to say?
So I was just going to bridge in a slightly different direction. I'd love to talk about iBeacon and AirDrop.
Yeah.
And what happens with them in iOS 7, because I think that some of this low power Bluetooth stuff is going to be incredibly enabling of the vision which.
So explain what those things are, just for the.
Just before we go there, just one last comment on the previous conversation, which is I think the fact that all this great content is becoming available, there's two missing pieces: live sports and live news. And it feels to me as if Apple really wants to win, they have to go after live sports and live news. They've done a bit of live sports.
So just a data point there.
But they have live sports on the iPad, right? They have the MLB things and NFL things.
And again, if they've got it on the iPad, it may not be totally HD, but if you got it on the iPad, then you've got it on the big TV again. Yeah. So just a point that with the exception of football and some baseball, the percentage of audience for live sports is around 4%. So this is really starting to damage NHL, NBA, etc. So yes, you're right, but it doesn't have the economics to support the current system, let alone a new one. John, go ahead. Can you describe what you mean by AirDrop and iBeacon?
iBeacon.
Yeah, so AirDrop is the feature that's been out for a while, and has been sort of Apple's attempt to facilitate file sharing across networks. And I think it gets more interesting in iOS 7 and begins to sort of walk on Dropbox's and Google Drive's feet. And then AirDrop is the low energy Bluetooth, which enables devices, the micro-location devices, and a whole bunch of things which are starting to connect into your phone and use your phone and your iPad as a hub for data activity and for connectivity. And if you could do this in an efficient way, efficient usually, I think most importantly is the power management stuff.
If the wires go to software, basically.
Yeah,
that's what's going on.
Yes. If it all then it all becomes software, and it opens up a lot of the freaky stuff which Robert was talking about. The ability to be able to geofence, the ability to be able to take accelerometer data off the device or move it from from your wrist over to the phone. I mean, there's a lot of interesting stuff which is going to come out of it. So and you know, Apple's decided to stick another I in front of this, right? And so because this was going to get another name like Bluetooth Low Energy or BLE, I think. But now it's become IBeacon, and I think it's important to Apple when they go pull out those eyes.
Okay, so we've solved the
Kevin, did I miss anything in terms of the description of these things? What do you think about what's going on here?
Well, I think what we're seeing is a surge of interest in trying to standardize some of these bits and pieces that have been built as proprietary overlays. And that's, I think how Apple brands them, can be tricky. We've had a lot of this ability with the ZeroConf stuff for quite a while, which is straightforward DNS-based discovery over the local network. But the challenge is not everything's on the local network; they're on something else. So you've got to start doing these bridging things to make stuff move back and forth. I think the other point, the context point from what you were saying about accelerometers and positioning and things like that, I think that gets important. And it hooks back to what Robert was saying originally, which is we're going to need to start making these things not point-by-point requests, but effectively, bus callbacks, where you say, okay, I want location data. When you have some, call me back, and then I'll adjust what I'm doing. Apple started to talk about this with iOS 7, but this makes much more sense. It's like there are some things where you really want to turn on the GPS because you're actually trying to navigate the car, and other times you just want some kind of vague location to have a clue of, should I give you something about San Francisco or Boston? And being able to sort of mediate these things and make sure that you're sharing out the power drawing interaction pieces between the applications that want to subscribe to them, that kind of bus modeling is what we're going to start to see, and that will make a big difference to energy consumption and whether these things are actually viable. And definitely Apple's thinking about that. I suspect the other players will start thinking about this too, because power management is getting more and more important in this mobile stuff.
Well, the iOS 7 release, as well as the OS 10 release that are coming up, are both very heavy in terms of power management.
Yes, yeah. Well, they're doing subtle things about messing around with the CPU to save battery, but another part is doing power management on these other sensors and media devices, so that you're actually sharing them between applications rather than one app seizing them. And that is a structural difference, and it's going to require apps to rewrite themselves, but it's going to make a big difference in the long run.
So just to understand this, is it the case then that there's going to be these beacons are physical hardware that will exist in the real world, like on a telegraph pole or whatever, on every street corner? Will they have identities and broadcast metadata, or just, hey, I'm here? And do they replace what GPS currently does, or supplement it for power consumption reasons?
I think it's mostly designed for indoor use rather than outdoor use. So it'll give you location within an area. And so it's a sort of replacement for the kind of Wi-Fi triangulation stuff that people are doing, where something is explicitly doing this, and it doesn't require you to turn Wi-Fi on.
So is there a cloud-based directory of, this particular beacon is at this particular place, or does the beacon store some data that tells you where it is?
So Keith, I mean, these beacons and iBeacon is not a physical product, as I understand it. This is software in iOS 7.
Right.
Are you sure about that? I thought it was that when I read it, I couldn't understand that. It felt to me like there was some physical, real-world element to it.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. I mean, they may. I mean, look, they may very easily add, iBeacon capability into the Wi-Fi boxes and into Time Machine. Those nice, rectangular cube things now. And so it could take on a physical presence there, but I think we're talking about software and optimization in Bluetooth and all the devices that are already moving around our pockets and our world.
So that crosses over into my Cisco discussion, because the Cisco discussion was all about the real world and how Wi-Fi access points could become signals for a whole lot of stuff. If the MAC addresses could be exposed, and if there was the ability to look up from a MAC address information about the place and the services available in that place.
Well, we don't even need to use MAC addresses. You can just use the .local DNS lookup for that. That actually works now, and that's how AirPlay finds things. That infrastructure's there. You just need to write an SDK around it.
What do you need?
It's basically there's multicast DNS, and then the .local domain that says what's nearby. So you do a query against .local and see what services are available, and you say, is there anything here that can receive a TV signal that I'm sending, a video signal I'm sending, or is there anything that's got a service that'll provide this? You use it for printers and for AirPlay and things like that at the moment. So that's a very general technology. It's just it hasn't been picked up as much.
So I have one of these Bluetooth beacons on my key ring that somebody gave me, and it's spitting a number into the air every few seconds, and that can be used for positioning as well. The indoor mapping companies are going to be able to put these little beacons in a mall and be able to position you at a table very, very accurately. I think that investment is going to be made for commerce, not for entertainment at first. When we are able to go into a bar and order a beer without going and waiting at the bar or waiting for the server to come over, then we know the world has shifted to support all this stuff. I don't know that it's that important at home, because what room I'm in doesn't really affect my entertainment needs that much. And
well, no, but it affects which TV you want to play it or which speakers you want to play it. If you go home like that,
that's true. Yeah. That's true. So when I walk through my house in 10 years, it's going to light up a TV next to me and put whatever I want on that TV, and I'm going to be able to talk to the TV. So,
but I mean, we've already got that device. It's in our pocket, and the iPad Mini is
right. But you have to manually say, "Oh, it's the upstairs TV I want right now." It's not. The problem is that use case isn't that big a pain.
Yeah, because those are patterns you've used. It's more like, okay, I'm in this unfamiliar hotel room. How do I get the thing to go to the TV? Or I'm in some familiar conference room in the office. I want to make sure I can get access to this stuff.
Right. And if you're in an office, you know how you get training on how to make your PowerPoints work.
But I'm just so I just went to a website, and I'll put it in the thing, which is. It is saying that there are third-party Bluetooth low-energy emitters envisaged as part of what iBeacons is. In other words, it's about the collaboration between physical objects to provide software services that couldn't be achieved just on the phone itself.
I have one on my key ring. It costs right now it costs $30, but that's in no quantities. If you build millions of them, the cost goes down to $1 or 50 cents, something like that. I mean, it's just a piece of a chip, right? It's there's nothing there much. I spoke at the Bluetooth World Conference, and they can be built in millions for very, very low cost, and they expect 5 years from now to have them all over our world.
So that brings together something else for me. It was announced this week by ICANN they're meeting in Durban. That they've just started an identifiers advisory group that Paul Moka-Petris, who's the inventor of Bind, is going to head up. And I had an email interchange with Paul and asked him whether this was about the DNS, and he said no. This is about new identifiers being needed for a whole bunch of new stuff. And I think this kind of fits into that, because all of this stuff needs lookup and knowledge, whether it's .local, as Kevin said, but there's other ones that probably are not .local that are more global in character. Things like weather sensors become very different in this world. It feels to me like it's the opening up of something quite big.
You can get tastes of it with this product, right? This has low energy Bluetooth and can be spitting an identifier into the air. So as I walk closer to you, your glass could say, hey, Robert Scoble is 10 feet from you, And if I turn on that kind of use case, right now the infrastructure just isn't there. First of all, nobody has glass. Second of all, there's no app to do that. Third of all, we have to get over our freaky fear of this new world. And there needs to be a use case there to turn it all on. most people haven't had a use case where they like Highlight, for instance.
And from a business point of view, it suggests there's a new life to infrastructure business as well, to me.
I think so, particularly inside retail establishments. I mean, right down the street from me is the Half Moon Bay Ritz-Carlton, which is one of the top customer service organizations in the world, and they spend a lot of money. In fact, they have an open table computer in their main restaurant, so you can use your iPhone and get a reservation there. There's a Spa Finder computer in the spa, so you can use Spa Finder to do the same thing, but they don't talk to each other, which is sort of funny. And then there's a third computer in a second restaurant, and then there's a fourth computer system that runs their hotel. So if you get a room there, you're in a fourth system that doesn't talk to any of the other three systems. And then they don't know anything about me. I've checked in there on Foursquare 220 times. And I go in there, and they don't know anything about me. The bartender does, because he knows what I like. But they don't know anything about me. I go to another Ritz, like the one down in L.A., and they don't have any clue that I'm a major user of the Ritz's services. And that won't last very long. 5 years to 7 years at most. And I think possibly even last, maybe even 2 years. We're going to want to do things like we do with Uber. So with Uber, you pull out your phone and you say, I need a cab or a ride. And you see all the rides around you, and you see one of them take your job and start moving toward you. And you see how long it'll be before that ride gets to you. And you can even chat with the driver. You can rate the driver. You can see what the driver looks like. You can see what his rating or her rating is, all that stuff. We're going to have that same experience inside the Ritz. You're just going to sit down, pull out your iPad or your Android phone and say, I want an Oban whiskey. And it's just going to come to you. Right now, that's impossible to make happen because, first of all, their systems aren't talking to each other. And second of all, there's no indoor mapping technology yet that it can locate me to a specific table, so that needs to be built, and on and on. So it's going to be interesting watching this stuff evolve. I think the Ritz will spend money on making their customer service that new Uberized thing, but it'll be a 1 to 8 years.
Well, there are people building things like that. I mean, I can't remember the name of it now. I'm looking at the app, but there was an app that there's a what's it called? There's a bar in San Francisco I went to that you could do that in. Coaster, that's it.
Yeah, there's starting to be apps that do it with specific bars. That's fun. When that becomes industry wide, that's when it really becomes interesting. Although, Gillmor Gang is always about what's next, and the fact that there's one bar proves the point and makes it a Gillmor Gang topic, right?
Yeah, it's like 5 bars in San Francisco or something. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know there's others on the way. I saw an app that lets you look for healthy food at restaurants and order it and stuff like that. We were talking.
So I've got a friend staying with me. John knows this guy as well. Nick Bitchinich used to be in London at Siberia. John is staying with me, and he's got an app called Echo Echo. And Echo Echo, yesterday he wanted this guy to come over, who's a friend, and they did this Echo Echo thing. And we saw the guy's progress to my house as if it was an Uber cab. It was like Uber cab for everybody. That, yeah. And it was actually amazing. We knew he was going to arrive in 2 minutes, so we had to wrap up what we were doing. So that idea of precision about movement, really, what Uber has done is just for Uber. Why isn't that more broadly available? And it should be, and it could be.
Well, they just had an announcement this week about ride sharing, which is, I think, very, very interesting because they're starting to come up against some competition from, Lyft and other startups because they've been so successful at sort of breaking the logjam with the taxi carriers, if you will. And so this is going to cut the cost of these. I mean, like when we were at John's beta day, Robert, you and I hitched a ride on your Uber cab. That was the first time I actually used it. And, and you paid for the whole thing. So obviously, if it can be
definitely winning there.
So I'm in favor of the innovation so that I don't have to return the favor the next time.
Yeah.
But I mean, I do want to bring it back around to what we've been talking about, and I just want to bookmark this. By the way, I've been trying to get this conversation, going full blast on the Gillmor gang for a very long time. And today is the first time that we've actually broken through into this media discussion in a way that I think is very exciting. So I'd like to bring it around to the sort of the beginning of this by suggesting that what Uber is doing with sharing of identity across, trips, group trips, etc., is essentially what we're talking about here. In terms of sharing channels and the notion of channels, distributing them via apps so that the user doesn't really care what the channel is. They start to focus on what the event is that they have been alerted to, and then the social signals take over in terms of creating the value. If you look at what Uber does, which I don't like, which is this, what is it, demand, what do they call it, when there's some sort of an event like the president's in town.
Demand pricing, they call it.
Yeah, exactly. That's very smart. I think that's what we're going to start to see in television is demand pricing taking over, because that's the only way that Apple's going to be able to break this logjam with the cartel, is by paying them enough, by changing the economics of the situation to the point where it's no longer relevant. When HBO starts to have enough revenue to offset the decoupling from the cable companies, then you're going to see some really fast movement. And my last question here to wrap this up, and I want to start with Borthwick, is again, do you really think this is going to happen this year?
Yeah, so I think yes. I think that there's going to be something. I'm still betting that Apple's going to do something big with TV this year. And I think we're seeing sort of cracks in the system. I think that there's one thing which we're a bunch of geeks and we haven't talked much about, but I think it's really important to watch closely what's happening with ESPN, because ESPN is probably the sort of, it congeals the cable package and the cable bundle. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's fun to focus on HBO, which I think is also important, but I think ESPN is actually, in terms of the rights and in terms of the dollar flows, I think ESPN is still the largest sort of stake in the cable in the bundle, right? Mm-hmm. And so that if they begin to move, then it will all flow pretty fast after that. There's there are a few key tentpoles in the old world and in the bundle.
And it's not coincidental, I don't think, that Apple TV has just started serving on a HBO ToGo, which is right. TV everywhere, and ESPN.
Yep.
Right. So
so I think it's starting to happen. I think the points. It's funny. Kevin and Robert were making the same point from a different direction. Kevin was making a point that it's going to be very hard for Apple to broker these deals with the content guys and with the cable guys, because they've now established the precedent with the iPhone that they broke, a cartel, and so people are going to navigate that very carefully. Whereas when they did the iPhone and AT&T and developed and did the deals with the music companies, they were the small guy on the block. And so I think they've got, and then Robert's point, which I think got you to the same place, his freaky point on the guys who are going to win here are many startups who are going to do insanely interesting things using the data. And if you're the large incumbent player, it's hard to do that. And I think that Apple is sort of not fundamentally a data company. And so I think that, if you look at all the stuff that's happening with Dropbox and, how they're beginning to sort of, the evolution of the API and the platform on Dropbox, it's like Apple, has so far to go with its like iCloud and AirDrop platform. And they're falling behind there. So I think that there's a lot of interesting tension here, but I think you're going to see this year some breakthrough on the TV side, and I think Apple does something big before the end of the year.
Okay, Robert, you agree?
Yeah, I do. I think there's going to be an Apple TV cable box coming out soon. Whether it gets out this fall or not, I don't know, but I'm hearing rumors that they're working on one for this fall. If it doesn't happen this year, it's certainly going to happen in the next 18 months. That's very clear to me. It's just, does it happen in the next 6 months? For us, probably. For normal people, probably not.
Keith.
Interesting show, by the way. I love these 9 a.m. slots. We should do this again.
Yeah, I'm going to call this one Breakfast Gang.
Here's my breakfast.
Yeah, we've been cutting to you.
I'm having my lunch.
I haven't had any breakfast yet. But yes.
I suggested in the chat you should call it Beacon and Eggs.
Oh, I like that too.
That's good.
Okay.
IBeacon.
You win. All right, Kevin.
This has been great for me because I've been paying much less attention to the tech for the last couple of weeks. So this has been a good re-immersion for me.
This is tech.
But that's exactly but I've been off, wandering the world, looking at universities. So.
I see. All right. Well, couldn't be happier. This is Steve Gillmor.
Steve, one last thing. Got a new toy to play with.
What is it?
The new Leap
Motion
cool. Sensor. So it's a 3D sensor and watches your hands, so you can do all sorts of things like musical instruments just by playing with your hands. Or
it's Connect for dummies.
No, it's a Connect style thing, but it sits on your desk, and it's a very small area that it watches, where the Connect watches the whole room, which makes this very high resolution and very low latency.
It's the theremin.
Yeah.
Yeah. God only knows, right?
Precious.
Nobody gets it. What was that? Was it? It wasn't Surf's Up. It was God only knows. What was the song? The Beach Boys song with the theremin?
I don't know, but these kinds of sensors are where the
question.
freaking
Is he
going.
Good vibrations. Thank you.
Good vibrations. Thank you.
And there we go. Anyways, thanks, Steve.
Thank you. I want to thank Rackspace and particularly Rob Legess, without which this show would not be on the airplay that we now are beginning to enjoy. I want to thank NewTek and their TriCaster and also their tech support. We've been investigating some emerging streaming services in addition to working with Ustream to improve our signal here. I want to thank our producer and director, Tina Chase Gillmor. What does that mean? Victory? Peace?
Peace and love.
Peace and love. That's what Ringo says. Get out of my way. I don't want... Ringo is the most crustaceous genius in the universe. And all the good names for Beatles songs and records were actually created by Yogi Berra. No, I'm sorry, Ringo Starr. And I want to thank, in New York, John Borthwick. This has been terrific. I want to thank, in Half Moon Bay, Robert Scoble. This has been terrific. Yeah. It is pretty cool, I have to admit. I want to thank Kevin Marks in, where are you, San Diego?
San Jose. I barely know. I was in Boston and Philly and DC and London. My head hurts.
everybody knows this because everybody's on Twitter now. And Keith, where are you, Keith Teare?
I am at home in Palo Alto.
Okay, well, thank you as well. Everybody has been terrific. The chat room will be posted as a link in the post on Saturday when this goes up on TechCrunch. And thanks to everybody who showed up, and especially those who didn't. We'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.